On the night of September 19, 2014, Charles Bankole was at his home in Port Harcourt, Rivers State, Nigeria. Charles was a civil engineer in his early 30s, working as a staff member at Halliburton Company in the Trans-Amadi area of the city. He was originally from Akoko in Ondo State, and by all appearances, he was a man doing very well for himself. That night, he called Loretta Odikabo and invited her over to his place. Loretta, a student at Rivers State Polytechnic, where she was studying for a diploma in mass communication, had been in a relationship with Charles for several months. They had met on a social network called Bado in January 2014, at a time when Charles was working offshore on a rig. They had become close online, chatting and exchanging pictures, and when he returned to Port Harcourt, they began seeing each other in person. When Charles called that night, Loretta agreed to come. She got ready to go to his house, but she did not go alone. She brought two other men with her. Why she brought them and what she intended to happen that night, she would keep to herself for the time being. The two men were kept out of sight as they arrived at Charles's compound. Loretta quickly slipped the two men inside and hid them under the staircase. Then, she went in alone to meet Charles. Loretta and Charles spent time together. They got intimate, and when they were done, Loretta left the bedroom and went toward the kitchen, telling him that she wanted a drink of water. Instead, she used that opportunity to let the two men in from the staircase. The three of them then moved from the kitchen into the sitting room. Charles was already up, having left the bedroom, possibly wondering why Loretta was taking so long. There was no electricity in the house that night. In the darkness, the two men revealed themselves. One was holding a torch. The other held an object that looked like a gun and also a length of masking tape. One of the men shone the torch directly at Charles and told him that he owed their sister and had refused to pay. Charles pleaded. He asked them to calm down and also promised that he would pay. The men got to work. One of them tied Charles's legs with a rope. The other taped his hands, and then Loretta stepped forward and slapped Charles repeatedly across the face. Charles told them there was no cash in the house. He pointed to his ATM cards and gave Loretta the PIN number. She and the other man left for a nearby ATM in the rain. It was close to midnight. They withdrew just over 120,000 naira from his account. Loretta paid the man who came with her roughly 30,000 naira at the ATM. She also called the man who had stayed behind with Charles to confirm that the PIN had worked. The man then asked Loretta if he should start making his way out. Loretta then told him to wait. Meanwhile, while Loretta was at the ATM, Charles was still in the house. He was tied up, hands bound with tape, legs bound with rope, and in total darkness. When Loretta returned to the house, she went into Charles's room. Then, she walked to the kitchen and came back with a polythene bag. What happened after that was something that would cause major confusion in the interrogation room. The following morning, Charles Bankole was found dead in his home. He had been suffocated. A polythene bag had been used to cover his head. When the death was reported and police arrived at the scene, they began piecing together what had happened. The apartment showed signs of a robbery. Items were missing, including a laptop and a phone. But the manner of death told investigators that something more than a robbery had taken place. A robbery does not typically end with someone being suffocated with a polythene bag. Detectives from the Criminal Investigation Department of the Rivers State Police Command were assigned to the case. They had very little to go on at first. The people responsible for the crime had left. There were no immediate witnesses who could identify who had been in that house that very night. Because of all this, the case went cold for months as investigators worked quietly in the background. Then, they caught a break. Detectives found an item at the crime scene that gave them a thread to pull. Working on that single piece of evidence, they traced it carefully until it led them to a person. From that person, a chain of connections emerged and the investigation moved forward. In December 2014, roughly 3 months after Charles was killed, Loretta was arrested. One of her accomplices was also brought into custody around the same time. A third person connected to the crime remained at large. When Loretta was questioned, she told investigators what had happened, though her account was careful about one particular detail. She described how she had met Charles on Bado in early 2014. She said that when they first connected, she believed he was a single man, but as time went on, she discovered he was married. She said the relationship had been built on financial promises that Charles never kept. He gave her occasional sums of money 10 or 15,000 every here and then, but for someone working in the oil and gas sector, that was far below her expectation. She said she asked her in-law, a man named Moses, to help her confront Charles and get money from him by force before she walked away from the relationship for good. She described taking Moses and another man to the house. She described hiding them under the staircase. She confirmed the robbery, the ATM withdrawal, and the items taken from the house. She acknowledged taking Charles's phone. She also confirmed that his laptop was brought to her the following day by Moses. But when it came to the polythene bag and what happened to Charles, Loretta said she knew nothing about it. She said she had not seen any of them use a polythene bag and that she only found out that Charles was dead when she was arrested. Moses told a very different story. Moses said that when Loretta returned from the ATM that night, she went into Charles's room and then came out and walked to the kitchen. She returned carrying a polythene bag. According to Moses, she then told him directly that if he did not help her kill Charles, she would be the first to name him to the police if anything went wrong. She placed the bag over Charles's head, sat on his head, and Moses said he assisted in holding the man's neck until Charles stopped moving. Moses acknowledged that killing Charles had never been part of what he understood to be the plan. He said the original arrangement was to go there, threaten Charles, get money from him, and leave. He claimed the killing was not something he had agreed to beforehand. The two suspects pointed at each other. Loretta said she had not been involved in the death. Moses said Loretta had been the one who produced the bag, placed it over the victim's head, and threatened him into participating. So basically, the two people who had been in that room when Charles died gave contradictory stories about who was responsible for his death. Loretta's account of how the relationship had developed gave context to how the night of September 19 had come about. She said Charles had made repeated financial promises that he never fulfilled. She claimed that when she discovered he was married, the relationship had already become physical and he had persuaded her to continue. Loretta explained that she only stayed because she was still waiting for him to honor his promises when he continued to give small amounts and nothing more. She decided she would end the relationship, but before she left, she wanted to get something out of the relationship by force. She described asking Moses for help, explaining that Moses was someone she drank with, smoked with, and knew very well. She had given him money in advance to buy a torchlight. She said she had planned the harassment, but had not planned for it to go as far as it did. Moses described a similar account of how he understood the plan. Go there, threaten the man, get the money, and just leave. He said he had even tried to recruit another person they knew, called Winkoro, but he refused to get involved. On the way, they came across another young man whom Moses knew, and he was brought along instead. The investigation concluded that Charles Bankole had been suffocated to death using a polythene bag. The motive was robbery, arising from a dispute over money in a relationship that had soured. The method of death showed that his killing had been deliberate and not incidental to the robbery. Loretta and Moses were charged in connection with his death under Nigerian law. Conspiracy to commit robbery, armed robbery, and murder all carry severe penalties, including the possibility of the death sentence. The shifting of blame between the two suspects would be a matter for the courts to weigh against the physical evidence and the witness accounts gathered during the investigation. The third person involved, the young man who had accompanied them that night and gone with Loretta to the ATM, remained at large and was being sought by investigators. What are your thoughts on this case? Share your opinion in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more true crime stories.